Kelly Jane is back with me in the Gal Matrix.
Happy to be here.
I'm excited for our topic today.
Me too.
Today, we're going to talk about hiring mistakes.
Oh, well, that's good because that's what I thought we were talking about too.
Good. That's good. Then we're
Yeah, I
getting
know
off
we're
to a
halfway
good
there.
start. Okay, well, I wrote down some of the common ones,
Oh, good.
and we have stories for each of them. And you said something a minute ago about my favorite hiring mistake and trying to guess what it is. Well, my favorite hiring mistake is me.
You were never a mistake.
Okay, well, we'll let the listeners decide after they hear the story.
Best mistake I ever made, if that's true.
Well, I do agree. I do agree with that. And not only did you hire me one time when I
I
wasn't
hired you
qualified,
three times. I
three
hired
times,
you.
three
Three.
times, three times.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
let's talk about the first time. So
Mhm.
the first time you hired me, you did what's called the mini me.
Mhm.
So so that's where you hire somebody because they kind of remind you of yourself and therefore you
Yeah,
assume
it's true.
they're qualified for the
Yeah.
job,
Uh-huh.
right?
We talked about books during the interview.
Yes. We talked about Bridget Jones' Diary, which we had both just read,
Mhm.
and we
That's
were both, what's that?
That was a long time ago. Yeah.
Oh, I counted today, which took me a long time since I'm so bad at math. It was 27 years ago. I know. I know, but let's not focus on that part.
No,
So you hired me because of the Bridget Jones Diary connection.
well,
The
not all
other
just that, but
the other reason was because
oh,
we had the same last name
true story. Uh-huh.
at the time. At the time, neither of us have
Yeah,
that
we
last
both
name
have
anymore.
ditched it since then. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yes, yes. The other thing, it's kind of related, is called the halo effect, which I think was also going on there, where I tend to be most of the time a pretty decent interviewer, right? Because I can kind of process fast and think on my feet when I'm not getting in my own way with what comes out of my mouth. But what what you didn't realize was that I was not in any way qualified to do the job. And I demonstrated that. So you hired me to, it was my first job in HR. You hired me to be your admin assistant.
Yes.
And what you didn't know was that I was currently probably the worst admin assistant that the legal department had ever had in their
That might be
entire.
why they called me and asked me and told me that you'd be a great candidate for my job.
Yes,
If
yes,
you remember correctly, your boss and my boss were really good friends then. So I think that
yes.
someone was maybe passing you off
Yeah, and that made sense.
lovingly. Mhm.
Lovingly. But I had recently ruined Derek's, the head of legal, his $3,000 Italian leather chair with silly string. So, yeah, I think that also motivated him to
I
encourage.
didn't know that. That's a good
Mm-hmm,
one. Yeah.
yeah. So, the first thing I did after you hired me, was I was supposed to send out a conference call number for our global HR meeting.
Mhm.
And the person who had the job before me hadn't updated the passcodes in a long time. And back then, you had to call a company and they had to change the passcode for you.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes,
Wow. Super fancy.
yes, Premier conferencing.
It
And
was Premier. You're right. Yeah.
I can remember long ago,
I hear that voice in my head. Yeah.
yeah, I
Mhm.
can't remember where my keys are or my phone or my wallet, but I can remember that it was called Premier Conferencing. So I had to, this is a challenge for people like me, details. I was supposed to write down the new dial in number and the new passcode. but I transposed the dial-in number and I wrote down 800 instead of 888.
Mhm.
And then I sent that out to 50 people around the world who all called in to what turned out to be a sex hotline phone
I
number.
know. Best conference call ever.
Yes, yes, that was impressive. And then the next thing I did, you decided that I should have my own cell phone, which I'd never had before. And you probably don't even remember this.
Oh, no, I do.
Yes.
Oh, that
Two,
company's out of business now, so they can't come after us.
true, true. So 2 months into me having a cell phone, what I had primarily used it for instead of work was to call my long distance boyfriend. And I had to call you. And back in that at that time, cell phones were like $50, but I had charged up $500 on my cell phone in 1 month. And I had to call and tell you that because I couldn't pay for it myself. And you didn't fire me. Yeah. So but that's two things you want to look out for. Number one, that somebody reminds you of yourself, and so you
Mhm.
assume they're
Yeah,
qualified.
yeah, not always a great thing. Because
And
then you pick
the
the two things that I would have likely done for myself too.
mhm. Well, we
Mhm.
definitely had a lot of similarities. Still
Mhm.
do.
Mhm.
Um, so, and then the second one is the halo effect,
Mhm.
where just because somebody is able to hold a conversation during an interview, you assume that they actually are qualified to do the job.
This is true.
Yeah.
I
And
think
then,
I've seen CEOs hired that way.
no doubt. Um, so, the way to combat those two things, by the way, number one is what I call the 80-20 rule. So, the interviewer should make sure that the candidate is talking 80% of the time
80%, yes.
and the interview is talking 20% of the time. Whereas I feel like you and I we just went off and running. And most of the 80% of the time, we talked about Bridget Jones' Diary and having the name Whiteley.
I don't believe I ever actually asked you any questions pertaining to work.
That's my recollection as well.
So bad on me.
So the
And you
second,
should have taken that as a clue on how disorganized your boss would be, by the way.
but the good news about that was that you were so disorganized that you didn't notice that I was also disorganized. I was just slightly less disorganized,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I'm
That's
so
true.
glad that company's not in business anymore, so they can't go back and retroactively fire both of us for being so stupid.
Yeah.
We did make a
Agreed.
good team.
Agreed. The other thing that people can do is what's called behavioral interviewing.
Oh, yeah.
So
Mhm.
instead of asking somebody, how would you do something, you ask them to tell you about a time where they actually
When did
demonstrated.
you do this and how did it
Yes,
turn out? The,
yes,
the important
yes,
stuff. Hmm.
right. And so, like, when I interviewed for the very first time at Symantec, they should have asked me if I'd ever been on the internet or sent an email, given that it was a software company. Nobody
It
asked me.
happened. Really?
Yeah, they didn't ask.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Think about okay. Tell me about a bad hiring decision that you've made.
Oh, God, so many. Well, and it follows a pattern of if I liked them, I would fill in the blank for them on the rest of the qualities that they needed in order to make what I thought was a good hire, as opposed to being interested in the actual job skills. I have been very fortunate that I've had probably as many good hires, or more probably, than bad. But the bad ones tend to stay with you longer. And one thing you and I briefly touched on was, somebody had the right skill set, uh, all the right tools and things and knowledge in place, but they just weren't, it wasn't even a cultural fit. They weren't a good fit for a close relationship at work with somebody that, the two people, me and that other person, didn't like each other. And I hired them anyway. And over time, well, they were pretty good at their job. It was clear that they weren't happy in that job. And I wasn't necessarily happy with them in that job. And it was all apparent from the beginning. I mean, I think you just need to pay attention to the subtle and not so subtle clues about, if you connect with somebody, and it should never be over. This was purely a personality thing. It wasn't a race based or anything, that would be considered discriminatory in any way. But I think you should pay attention to those gut feelings sometimes if you're going to be able to get along with somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's too.
I think that's really a good example, but that for me, that does fit in the category of cultural fit, right? And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times you can have a gut feeling that something's not right. And to your point about trying to avoid discrimination, you need to ask yourself more questions. Like, where
Yeah.
is that gut coming from?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Why
then,
don't? Mm-hmm.
yeah, what is the root here?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe formulate some more questions that can kind of tease that out. You made me think of somebody I hired once who was really good at the job, but they were so hard on everybody else. They were so competitive and so defensive all the time that even though their deliverables were amazing, every day walking into the office felt like everyone else was walking on eggshells.
Oh,
And
yeah.
people would come to me all the time and just like people would threaten to quit over it.
Oh, yeah.
So to your point earlier about if you have a gut feeling, don't go forward. Figure out what that gut is trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm. And
Because
why?
once you
Yeah.
and why? Because once you make a bad hire, it's really difficult to move that person on.
Oh, it's like I've long compared it to having a bad relationship, uh, at home or otherwise. I mean, it takes forever to get out of those things, and it's incredible. It sucks up so much time. I mean, really, the hiring process should be rigorous so that you don't have to do something negative later on either side, right? I
Yeah,
mean, people should ask the right questions. And like you said, the 80-20 rule is a very good one to follow.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I don't want people to think that you weren't totally legit in um, how you were feeling and what you were sensing. The person that we're thinking of, who we won't name, they not only competed with you all the time and didn't act like they liked you, but curse word alert, they talked shit about you behind your
yeah,
back
yeah,
to other
yeah,
leaders.
yeah. Which,
And yeah, that's not good.
no, it was uncomfortable. Yeah. And then made worse by the fact that I was uncomfortable talking to that person about it. But
Yeah.
anyway,
So, do you remember what you did about that problem?
hmm?
Do you remember what you did about that problem?
I believe I foisted that person off on someone else,
Yeah, do you
like
remember who
every
that
good
was?
manager. Yeah, you. Uh-huh.
You gave your problem to me,
Uh-huh.
probably to pay me back for my
At
most
least one of those
recent,
quittings that you did. Yeah.
yes,
Uh-huh.
one of my,
Uh-huh. I think
yeah,
that was fair. I don't think she liked you any more than she liked me, by the way.
she did not. She did not. Okay. So this is the last one, and this is so important. I think this is something that people fall prey to so often, and that is hiring somebody because you feel desperate to fill a
Oh
position,
my goodness.
right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, that's almost as bad a mistake as the other one. Maybe
Yeah.
worse.
Yes. So, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's not just you that has the sense of urgency. You could be getting pushed on by your boss or by other people. And in this situation that I'm going to share, I was both getting pressure from my manager, but I was also getting pressure from my team
Oh
that
yeah.
worked for me,
Mm-hmm.
because this was when we were the help desk and we were on a queue and they were just drowning. So the
Mm-hmm.
mistake I made was to just go with somebody because she was good on paper, even though she didn't interview well. And she lived in, where the hell did
Very
she live?
far away.
Bend, outside
Bend.
of
Yeah.
Bend.
I
Yes,
was going to give you the code word bend earlier. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is way before we did much remote work. So we weren't
right,
really set up for that. And people weren't used to it. It would have been no big deal now, but
right. And what I didn't appreciate at the time, because I just was so desperate to fill the role, was that her goal in life was to actually get paid but not work.
yes. Uh-huh.
Yes, yes, it
Yes.
was. Yes, it was.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And had she actually spent as much energy doing the job as she did coming up with ways to not do the job,
Uh-huh.
um, and she was very creative. She would fake technology issues.
Who needs to fake them?
I know there are so many real ones, um, especially when you suck at technology like you and I do.
Well, we didn't even have really fancy technology. Then we had a phone and a computer. So it wasn't like, I don't know, it wasn't that hard. She knew how to use a phone,
Yeah,
kind of. Mm-hmm.
it was terrible. But after she had exhausted the technology issues that she could come up with and blame on our IT department, she then started saying that she felt harassed by me. And then she went
Yes.
out on a stress
Medical
leave
leave. Mm-hmm.
because I was managing her performance because
Yes.
she would take maybe 2 calls a day.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Then she came back for a week or two. And this is the best part because at the time I was also over corporate investigations for the whole company. She called the ethics line and raised a complaint against me for bullying and harassment.
You do remember that.
And since I was the head of investigations, I got investigated by the legal department. And I think I had like 30 employees at that time. And the legal person at the time who was assigned to this, she interviewed 25 of the 30 people.
Oh my
I
goodness.
I cannot tell a lie, but she did conclude that there were no findings. So at that point, I had amassed enough documentation that I could actually let this woman go, which I did. And then she made a bully complaint
Yes, she did. Mm-hmm.
against me.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a feeling that she was going to do that. So
Sure.
I had reams and reams and reams and reams of documentation. So, but that took a year and a half. So
It did. Mm-hmm.
it did, and it did, and lots of gray hairs, I'm sure, are attributed to that experience for me. So, so the moral of that story is, don't hire somebody because you are desperate,
Yes.
because
Hiring in haste is almost always a mistake.
almost always, and particularly because you are so concerned about time, and yet the time, think about all the hours. And that's why I
Oh,
told all the detail of that story, the hours and hours that I had to
hundreds.
spend and so many other people had to spend before this was finished.
Plus the added benefit of when you're in HR, you're in a little bit of a fishbowl when it comes to your performance issues and people because they're affecting, well, everyone in a job is doing this too, but everyone's looking at us thinking we should be fixing this because we're the people you come to fix things or help you fix things like that. So it's really intense when you have a poor performer that's particularly publicly facing or employee facing.
Absolutely. That is a really good point
Mm-hmm.
because you're trying to give other leaders advice, right, about managing performance issues in their domain, and they're like, "You're a hypocrite." You're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And
Well,
they
not
start,
only that, I mean, I think it's even worse for the people that work for you because their expectations, and no one ever really appreciates what you're going through as a manager when you're trying to counsel somebody about their performance because you're not telling everybody about it. So everyone thinks you're doing nothing 90% of the
yes,
time because they're
yes,
not seeing, they don't see somebody get fired the next day or, whatever, the population is more than happy to see that happen when it's not them having to do it. So
yeah, yeah,
it's tough.
yeah. Well, just to end this episode on a positive note, the fact that you hired me not once but three times is completely responsible for everything good that I have in my life today. My children, like,
Had nothing
and
to do with them.
but you hired me and then you moved me here. And I mean, truly, it has been the gift that has kept on giving my entire life. And
Well,
now
without getting all mushy, it worked out really well for me too. You did such amazing things when we were together at Symantec. That whole team was just phenomenal. It was really cool. If I could go do work again, which I don't want to do, I would do that just because it turned out so great.
I would repeat all of that as well.
Minus a few.
Right. Minus a few experiences, including the one where I got investigated by the legal department.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah. Well, I love you, and I'll see you again soon inside the Gal Matrix.
As always, I really enjoy this because it gets me to reflect on all those years. And well, it was really hard and everything. It was just an amazingly great journey. Learned lots.
It's so true. I read a meme today that said, um, it's funny how sometimes the people that you work with become people that you absolutely couldn't do without in your life.
I
And
would say
that's
that is
true.
100% true.
Amazing.
100%.
Yeah.